And then if the doctor walks in, the doctor who had said that she was 99% sure that there was nothing wrong, and she walked in and sat down and just said, "I'm sorry, you're right, there's something wrong with your bowel, it's cancer. And it's gone into your liver as well." I've got stage 4 bowel cancer. We're going to talk about everything from my diagnosis to treatment and how things are going right now. Talk about the things that people might be curious or want to hear but are too frightened to ask.
That's Jo McKenzie-McLean, and I'm Colleen O'Hanlon. We've been mates and colleagues at Stuff for 20 years. Since her diagnosis, Jo's been incredibly open about her illness on social media, and in this podcast, she wants to go further.
So I'm just hoping that what we do here can just help people who are on that journey, whether they've got cancer or not, and make them feel that, that they're not alone.
I'm going to be with Jo every step of the way. There will be tears and laughter. She'll also offer practical insights, support and hope. This then is the story of Jo versus cancer. Jo, hi.
Hi, Colleen.
So we've got quite a big task ahead, but I thought before we crack on with that, we maybe talk about why we're here together. And I thought I could start with giving you my recollection of our first meeting, which was before I had children. So I'm reckoning it's nearly 20 years ago. And it was at an underground bar on Litchfield Lanes, which were just been opened after they were refurbished. And it was like an opening night for media. And you were friends with, I think, Louise. Do you remember Louise, who was a reporter here and who went off to...
Yeah, Louise, yeah. She's a good friend of mine.
Yeah, so I think I knew her from the office, and then you arrived, this leggy blonde bombshell with a megawatt smile and like massive personality, and just lit up the room. And I think that's my first recollection from you, and I think you're really, you still embody that as far as I'm concerned. Aww. And then I think we had lots of parallels in our life.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've got a terrible memory and I don't remember that at all.
No, I don't expect you to. I think I was a lot more forgettable than you were.
But I do remember working with you in the office when I moved into the press, which was the press newsroom 20 years ago. And I remember being kind of in awe of your reporting. I was a new reporter and I felt like you were sort of someone I inspired to be like. And you also had a loud personality and were fun and had a big smile, but you were a really heads down.
Oh my God, that's so great to know. I worked hard.
Yeah, well, yeah. And so, as a new reporter, you look to the sort of more seniors in the office, and you were someone that I did inspire to be like. And I was, obviously drawn to your personality as well, so which is why it was naturally we became friends, I guess. And
I remember us connecting over being married, and neither of us had been married that long. In fact, I think you might have got married after I met you even. And then I was a couple of years ahead of you having babies, and I remember hanging out, me joyfully offloading all my baby stuff to you when you were about to have Travis, yep. And then there was those other kind of similarities: marriage, babies, divorce, dating, and all the kind of laughs, shits and giggles that came with that, right? And I think that was so, our lives had a lot of parallels until this point when they didn't,
Yeah, I was just going to say.
And I think...
let's hope we don't.
Yeah, and I think that's what really, I guess, why we're here today, right, is that there's some parts of your situation I can really identify with, but others that are really personal to you. And I think I'm excited to help you share your journey.
Oh, thanks. I'm glad you're doing this with me.
That's why we're here. Yeah. So what are we here to do?
Well, I guess we're here to talk about my experience with cancer. I've got stage 4 bowel cancer. And, we're going to talk about everything from my diagnosis to treatment and how things are going right now. Talk about the things that I guess people might be curious or want to hear but are too frightened to ask. I'm an open book, and I just through having since my diagnosis, and I've been quite vocal about what's been happening with me, and I've received lots and lots of comments from people I don't know, people who've got cancer, people who don't have cancer, and there is a real interest in what I'm going through, and a lot of people have thanked me for sharing what I've already written about or done on my Facebook page, because, you know, it's not something that's out there, but people don't necessarily want to talk about it, you know, and so there's, you know, just even simple things, and I've been quite shocked at just, yeah, even people who have got cancer who just sort of go into themselves and don't know how to speak out, or, you know, they may not want to. Not everyone wants to talk about their experience, and that's fine, but I've just found it therapeutic for me, and it's been helpful for other people. So I'm just hoping that what we do here can just, I guess, help people who are on that journey, whether they've got cancer or not, and just make them feel that, you know, that they're not alone, and some of these things that I'm going through just, yeah, might help them and help them get through it.
And their support crew.
And their support crew, yeah.
You know, you make that point that, you know, people don't want to talk about it, but I've wondered whether it's not that people don't want to talk about it, they don't know how to ask about it in a way that is not hurtful or offensive or disrespectful in some fashion, because it's new ground for a lot of people, right? You know, and it's a delicate subject. And I think really I could see that you were a podcast in waiting when I watched a piece of content on your Facebook page around, you know, what not to say to somebody about their cancer prognosis. And I think it's just really practically useful advice for the, you know, hundreds of thousands of New Zealanders who will be supporting somebody in their life or in their community who is battling cancer, whatever kind it might be.
I think those people get forgotten about too a little bit, you know, just I know with people around me, you know, my parents and my partner and just even children, they sometimes get a little bit lost in, you know, not pushed back, but I've become the focus, and they're also going through their own grief and their own struggles, and, you know, so it's important.
I think about your mum a lot, actually. You know, like, and then I can see the relationship between you is incredibly special, but also you're her precious daughter, and, you know, you've written about having lost your brother in the past, and I feel like for your mother, you know, I think, and as a mum myself, and, you know, that's something, not a situation that any of us ever imagine having to face when we give birth to beautiful babies, right? You know, so I haven't forgotten about her. I think about her a lot. So let's go back to the beginning. You know, like, I remember you as, you know, like, when you moved down south, down to Cromwell, you know, picture of good health, running up mountains, you know, basically, you know, rosy cheeks, you know, like living your best life down there. And that's, I think, how, you know, am I right in thinking, you know, that's how you were? Then what happened?
Yeah. So, you know, I just had my second child. I was I joined the gym. I wanted to get back into fitness and an active lifestyle, and I was training with a couple of friends. A friend of mine, Terry, down there, who runs ultramarathons and other events, was keen to grab a woman who had just had a baby, who had a sort of averagey body, and wanted to show people that they could be capable of running ultramarathons and doing amazing things. And so I started actually writing about this experience.
I remember,
yeah, in the paper.
I was jealous.
But I just had this amazing support, and I never thought I could do an ultramarathon. You know, I never thought that I could do some of the things that I did. But I had this little crew around me who had me running up mountains and Central Otago landscapes, and they were really tough. And then I got injured. I had a labral tear, and then from there, so that was probably, I'm trying to think of the time
frame. So we're in 2022 now. Would that have been maybe like 2017?
Yeah, probably about that.
Yeah.
And then from there, I just didn't come right. I had a labral tear, and then I was struggling with that a bit, and then I got back sort of on track, and then started going back to the gym again, and getting really fit. And I joined this. I did a program for you know, how they do 20-week challenges or whatever. So I did that, and I have photos of my body transforming, and I was, again, lifting weights and running and doing really well, and I ended up actually winning this gym competition. And just after I won the competition, I was walking the dog, and my knee was really sore, and I just couldn't... it just wouldn't come right. And then I just woke up one morning and my hand was really sore, and I went to the doctor, and they said it was probably just sprained or something, or they didn't really know what was wrong. But from there, I mean, I think that's unrelated, but... it
was the beginning of a catalogue of things.
Yes, I just started to have health problems in my body. So my knee... then I started to get like this random pain in my wrist, and over the course of maybe like a year, I went and got steroid injections in my knee. I had a little tear, but there was no explanation for why it was so sore and swelling up and all of this stuff. And in the meantime, I also started having funny bowel movements, and so this is 2018. And
I'm assuming they weren't actually funny.
No.
Like unusual.
Unusual bowel movements, and just feeling extremely fatigued. Like really, I remember driving to jobs and just feeling completely whacked. But then at that point, I had separated from my husband. I was a single mum. I had a busy life, and so, you know,
lots of good reasons to feel fatigued and drained. Yeah,
but I mean, I was going to the doctors. I felt like I was going to the doctor all the time, saying I'm really tired. I think my iron's low, or something is wrong. I've got this pain in my knee that's not going away. I've got this and this and this, and so I was going to the doctor. And then I did. And in 2018, I went back and said that I had my bowel movements were different. And I had said I was worried about my bowel, and that my uncle had not long been diagnosed with bowel cancer, and my nana had also had bowel cancer. She actually died from bowel cancer. And
how old were you at that time, Jo?
So
in 2018,
I'm 44.
Yeah, so you would have been about 40.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't remember all the details of that visit, but I do. I got my medical notes. I've since got copies of my medical notes, so it's on record. But they said that I didn't fit the criteria for a colonoscopy. I had asked for a colonoscopy, and then later that year, I think it was the November, I went back again and said that I still had my bowel movements were still not normal. And once again, I asked for a colonoscopy, and they, for some reason, you know, they said that I didn't fit.
Declined.
I didn't have all the symptoms for the colonoscopy, and it was declined. They said that I didn't fit the criteria. There's a criteria that they go through, you know, have you got blood in your faeces? Have you got this? Have you got that? And I didn't have blood in my faeces. But then I've.
And does it matter like that in terms of family relations? Is it like parents and siblings would go up get you a tick in the box, but uncles and grandparents are out, a ring further out? Is it right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. If it had been my mum, or dad or whatever, then that would have
helped,
ticked one of those boxes. But because it was a relation that was further out, and I mean at that point I didn't really understand all of that. I just trusted what the doctors said, and you know I was already feeling like a hypochondriac because I was going for all these other things, and so you know there could be lots of explanations, I guess, why you might have your bowel movements might be different. I was taking drugs for pain for other things, so that can sometimes cause bowel movement.
Oh yeah,
to happen.
Upsets your systems in other ways, right?
Yeah, so certainly so I went away and, but between then and my actual diagnosis, I had gone back. You know, I'd never been slack about my health, and at one point I'd been given a mammogram because I thought something was going on strangely there, and I got that easy. There was no trouble getting that. And also then I had ultrasound. I was bleeding a lot, and so they gave me an ultrasound just to check everything was okay down there, and that wasn't a problem. But for some reason, I couldn't get a colonoscopy, but I could get all these other things for my health, and I just was so confused as to why there was this.
Why the criteria is so much harder to meet.
Yeah, why I just didn't understand it, and I guess I should have pushed harder for it, but I trusted what the doctor's advice, and went away. But then I did start having. And I wonder now, in hindsight, whether this was a symptom of the cancer. I'd had a couple of instances where I'd been quite short of breath, and I had gone to the doctor about it. And it was really weird. I had an episode not long before my diagnosis in a restaurant in Queenstown, and I wish I'd called the ambulance they were going to, and I couldn't breathe, and I thought I was having a panic attack. But, where my tumour was sitting, it was sitting at the top of my bowel, which is why I've since found out there was probably no blood on my faeces, because where the tumour was actually, it was sitting up at the top, and I don't know, I had this kind of pain and shortness of breath. I don't know whether that's related or not, but I had a few of those that I went to the doctor about. So, I was going to the doctor a lot. Yeah.
And then what changed that you went back again?
So 2019, December 2019, I started feeling sick, having stomach cramps and just feeling quite unwell. And then the pain and frequency got worse, but it happened quite quickly. It was over about a 6-week period, but it
escalated.
Quite quickly. And I'd been at a friend's place for a barbecue and had really bad stomach pains, and I went to the doctor, and she thought, well, maybe it's food poisoning or a gastrobug or whatever. So I went home, and it didn't get better, it got worse, and I couldn't go to the toilet, and I started vomiting, and I rang my parents at 1 a.m, and I said that.
And you were in Cromwell, and your parents were in Invercargill at this point?
No, they live in Cromwell.
Oh, right, okay.
So they moved to Cromwell when my daughter was born to help me with daycare. And we rang the health line and spoke to a GP who was on call, who had looked at my records and saw that I'd been at the doctor, and that it was suspected that it was probably just a gastro thing. And she's like, well, at this time of night, they're not going to do much for a gastro bug or whatever. But if it gets worse, just go down to Clyde Hospital, which was about a 10-minute drive away. So I got off the phone, and then we ended up going down to the hospital, basically, and they admitted me, and it was about 1 a.m, 2 a.m, and he did a few scans, and the doctor suspected the gallstones.
Yep.
And wasn't sure what else was going on, but he said they'd do checks in the morning. And so by the time the morning came around, the doctor at the hospital there,
Did they, at that point, think, did you have to ask for a colonoscopy then? Did they offer it?
No, so the colonoscopy part was sort of over and done with. That wasn't on the radar. The tests that they were going to do were sort of like scans and stuff. Yep. But I didn't get any scans. Because I wasn't going to the toilet, they'd given me some enemas and laxatives, and that hadn't worked. I was still blocked up. I sort of my tummy came right in the morning, and and then I got discharged, that's when the doctor came around in the morning rounds and asked me how my stomach was feeling, and I kind of
self-examined
and had said that it was okay and it felt all right. And so he had said, well, that's good enough for me. It's probably, it might have probably been a reaction to your arthritis drugs or, gastro. And he's discharged me, and I had said, well, I'm really worried about my bowel movements. Could you refer me for a colonoscopy? And he laughed and said, well, that's not usually something people ask for because they're really unpleasant. And I was like, well, it's better than the alternative. But anyway, I didn't get the colonoscopy referral, and he told me if I, got into pain again, I was just to go back to the GP. So that's what I did.
3 times you asked for a colonoscopy referral and 3 times told no.
Yeah. And then I ended up going back to the GP the next day, still in pain.
Same GP?
Yeah. And she gave me, I was crying, and she gave me drugs for stomach cramps and sent me home. And again, that pain last night was horrendous. And I remember thinking, there's something seriously wrong. The pain felt worse than it did when I was in labour. I couldn't move. I was hunched over. I couldn't eat. I couldn't go to the toilet, and I was vomiting up nothing. It was really, really awful. And so I took Mum back to the doctor the next day, and that's when I got a different doctor. I got a locum from Wanaka who was in there, and a young doctor. And as soon as she saw me, she examined me and was on the phone to Dunedin Hospital saying I needed a CT scan and that I was presenting with X, Y and Z. I don't know. It didn't take long. It was only about 10 minutes, but I felt like I was being listened to and felt like it was
action. Things were happening.
So I had to go back to Dunedin Clyde Hospital for a CT scan, and she warned me then that they'd do their own assessment on me. But she said if they don't do the scan that you need, don't take that. She said just go straight down to Dunedin Hospital because they're expecting you. And sure enough, I got to the hospital, they did their assessment, and they weren't going to give me a CT. They thought that I was fine. And we were like, well, call Dunedin Hospital because they're expecting me. We came here for a CT scan. And so, and I'd mentioned something about my rheumatologist. So she rang the hospital and also rang my rheumatologist and came back and she said, you're getting this scan. I've spoken to your rheumatologist and she thinks the drugs you're on could affect your liver and you need a CT scan to see if anything's suspicious. But it was because of that I got the scan.
Yeah, so at that point they agreed to a scan, but they weren't looking for cancer.
No.
They were thinking there might be an impact from other medication you were taking for rheumatoid arthritis.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Yeah, and she said there's 99%, I'm 99% sure there'll be nothing wrong. But at this point I was thinking, I thought I might have had a twisted bowel. I thought there was definitely something wrong with my bowel, and I was like, I think it's a twisted bowel. I never thought cancer. I never thought cancer at all. That never, ever crossed my mind at all. And, and so I had the scans and she said that she couldn't see them all because there was a hold-up. The person before me had 100 images taken and there was a hold-up, but she said, that she was 99% sure that there was nothing wrong, and she said you can stay tonight if you want or you can go home and come back in the morning. But, so I went home. It was Mum's birthday the next day and we thought, we'll go and go out for morning tea or lunch. We'll call into the hospital, get the results for the scan and then we'll go out. So that was the plan. So...
oh my God, what a day of extremes.
Oh my God. It's such a long-winded story. It's probably quite painful to try and put the timeline together, but it's because I was going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and it's.
I think that's one thing that we should touch on, whether now or later. But and we have briefly talked about it before. But that idea of really having to advocate for your own health in the system, and acknowledging that you were capable of doing that and had the support of your mum to do it, but not everybody, Not everybody can have those difficult conversations with doctors and medical professionals who are in, positions of the experts, right? So, it's that kind of, it's quite a tough conversation to come up against, I think.
Yeah, and you start feeling like a hypochondriac. And I'm a strong woman. I don't sit back and, I was going to the doctor multiple times. I get frustrated with myself now, and I think back, God, I should have pushed harder, and I should have gone to another doctor, changed doctors, or done something, because
time matters.
My story might be a lot different, and it breaks my heart to think that I'd been trying really hard and getting turned away, or I think that just because I appeared as a fit and healthy young woman that cancer.
It didn't warrant investigation.
Yeah, and I'm telling them that my uncle has bowel cancer, my nana has it, and I'm having problems with my bowel. Like, just because I don't tick 5 of the boxes, it's just not right. You shouldn't have to. I don't know. That doctor laughed and said people don't ask for these colonoscopies because they're not pleasant. And yes, okay, so that's another reason why if someone goes to the doctor saying, I feel like I really need one, there's something not right.
Not asking for a good time.
Yeah, it's not. It's like...
It's somebody who's had one, you're not asking for a good time.
Yeah, so, God, they can't have that many people going saying, can I please have a colonoscopy? It's not like there's a queue at the door.
So what happened on the morning then? So tell me how the morning went. You got up for morning tea for your mum's birthday.
Yeah, and drove to the hospital smiling, and I wasn't in any pain. And we got there, and I was like, Joe McKenzie-McLean here for CT scan results, and the nurse was like, her face just kind of
gave something away.
And then she called a nurse, and this male nurse came to get us, and he walked about 20 metres in front of us and didn't even talk to us, and then sort of ushered us to this room where I had not been. It wasn't in the ward, it was in this ambulance bay waiting room where the helicopter lands to take people away. And Mum
Did you feel like it was a room where people got bad news?
Yes.
Right.
Well, or I started to get worried because I was like, why am I in this weird room? And Mum said, it's probably just because we're going to be in and out. And I said, well, or it could be because it's bad news and they're going to whisk me away to Dunedin Hospital. Like, why am I in this room? And it was early in the morning, so, and I was sitting there and I was looking around, and it was awful. It was an awful room. The rubbish bins were all full. They hadn't been cleaned, and they were full of tissues. And it was really...
Anxiety levels are high.
Yeah. And then the doctor walks in, the doctor who had said that she was 99% sure that there was nothing wrong, and she walked in and sat down and just said, I'm sorry, you're right, there's something wrong with your bowel, it's cancer. And it's gone into your liver as well. And
what happened in that moment between you and your mum?
I was sitting on the bed and Mum was sitting on a chair, and Mum's face, like her jaw just dropped and her eyes like bulged out of her head. And I just felt like, I lost my breath and just felt like I felt like everything actually kind of like got sucked out of my body, and I was almost looking down on myself. I was quite dizzy. And I was like, she was talking and I couldn't hear her, and I was just watching this from a bird's eye view, and then it kind of everything kind of went back into place, and I said, am I going to die? Because you hear cancer and you think death.
Of course you do.
And I was like, am I going to die? And then she said, it doesn't look good. And then I just started crying, and Mum was hysterical, and I was sobbing and crying, and then and she got, and I just remember she got up and left us there, and
Oh, Joe, I cannot even imagine what would be going through your mind. Like a scramble of thoughts about your family and children.
Well, as when she said it doesn't look good, you know, all that I could think about then was my kids, you know, Travis and Morgan, and like just it's so hard to explain the feeling of getting told that you've got cancer and then to make it worse that you could potentially die, and the shock and just it was just shock and just I was I had the image of my children and me not being here, and then like the anger of it all and just disbelief. Like there was just a whirlwind of emotion, and we were just left there sobbing. And I kind of thought later, what a horrible way to tell someone they've got cancer. And I've heard of worse stories than that. And I thought, you know, they really could have sat us in a family room, somewhere nice, had a counsellor, someone who was there that could sit there with us and just, you know, not deliver the news so clinically. And I kind of was like, well,
I wonder if that's maybe part of their coping mechanism, you know, like if it's part of your job to maybe deliver that kind of news to people on the regular, news that you know is of an enormous magnitude for them, maybe as people in emergency services do sometimes, it's a way of self-protection, you know, maybe. Possibly.
I don't know. But yeah, I've heard of quite a few stories of just that news being delivered in quite a cold way and I also thought it was a bit premature to be telling me just as soon as I've had cancer that if I'm asking am I going to die and she says it doesn't look good. I mean, she's not an oncologist. I mean, she's a doctor, yes, she's...
It's also quite a flippant comment about something that's so massive, you know, like it's you may be right, maybe that's a conversation to happen a bit later.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, well, like that's what I sort of thought, and it's kind of like, well, like even now, I don't want to think that it doesn't look good, you're going to die, you know? I'm kind of like, well, don't take away my hope, or like as soon as you've delivered the news, don't take, like I just think that wasn't appropriate.
Especially when mindset is an incredibly important part of your journey, right, you know?
And I mean, she at that point I didn't know that my liver was inoperable, but, you know, it could have been that the lesions were in a place where, you know, I could have had an operation because, you know, livers regenerate and you only apparently need a third of a clean liver to survive. So there was every chance that they could have operated on my liver. I don't know. But, I thought it was unnecessary to have said that to me, and it really upset me.
So once, you know, your mum and yourself are left there, and obviously an incredibly distressing situation, then what? Like, you're just expected to pack up and go home, or you're admitted to hospital, or what's happened?
So, Mum ran after the doctor at that point and just said, well, what's happening, and so it turned out that I had a tumour that was blocking my bowel that I needed surgery immediately. So I was admitted to hospital and I had to wait. There was a bed blockage at Dunedin Hospital, so there were a few of us at Clyde that were waiting to get the okay to be able to go to Dunedin. So they admitted me for the night, and
so were you in hospital by yourself that night? Did your mum stay with you?
No,
where are the kids?
Kids were with their
dad.
The kids were with their dad, and my partner Michael was with me, and my parents were eventually, they were there, but they eventually left. And I had a friend turn up with just some things. Chantal came and turned up with some things for me, and but eventually, it was just Michael and I, and we were in a room at the end of the hospital, like a family room, and I just lay awake, and we just lay on the bed together, and I just cried.
I'm sure he did too. Of course you would.
And just thought about we're processing what we'd just been told, and like the shock was kind of wearing off, and then I kind of ended up just focusing on getting this tumour out of me, and I thought, right, well, let's get the tumour out, let's have the surgery and see where we go from there. And a nurse had come in, and it was a woman that I'd done a story on a few years earlier, and the nurses were really lovely, and she came up to me and gave me a hug, and she said, "Oh, Jo," she said, I saw your file on the desk, and I thought, oh no, not you. And she gave me this hug, and I was kind of like, oh God, it must be bad. She was like, yeah, and she gave me this big hug, and anyway, she ended up giving me these. I ended up they ended up having a gap, and I got on a bus at an ambulance transport van at 6 a.m. They came rushing in and said, "Get dressed. There's a gap. We're getting you on a car in an ambulance." So it all happened in a bit of a hurry. And this nurse that had given me this hug, she said, "Oh, the rides are really awful." I was in a bit of pain, and she was like, "Oh," because I started feeling a bit woozy, and she was like, "Oh, I've given you something just to make the ride a bit easier." Because I stood up and I was like, what's happening? So I was like, oh, thanks for that. So I don't know what she gave me, but it was good.
So what happened? So you're on your way to Dunedin, you're off to have surgery, kids are with their dad. At what point are the kids told that mum's not well, and what are they told, and who tells them?
Well, they knew I wasn't well because I'd been having stomach pain, and I'd been in and out of hospital and doctor's appointments and stuff. So I actually don't know what they were told at that point, because I was in an ambulance and all of that. But we were just saying that I had a sore stomach, and the doctors were trying to help me. So they didn't know that I had cancer or the diagnosis at that point. But when I got to hospital in Dunedin and I was waiting for surgery, I'd been away from home for a couple of days at this point, and they were getting quite anxious about where I was and why I wasn't coming home and why were they having to stay at Dad's. And so Steve, my ex-husband, actually drove them to see me. And I had a room on my own, thank goodness, in the hospital, and they sat and
and how old were they then, Jo? Like 7 and 9 maybe, something like that?
Yeah, something like that. And they just climbed up on the bed and were cuddling me, and they were drawing pictures. The walls at the hospital were really cold and bare, and I had some paper and some pens there, so they started drawing pictures for me to colour the walls up, and that was really hard, having them in the hospital, because it was really good, but it was really, really hard. I was really scared about
very confronting,
telling them, and looking at them and thinking, oh my God,
What does the future look like for them?
Yeah, and they were all oblivious to the seriousness of what was happening. And I was trying to keep it calm and be like, oh, I've got something in my tummy that needs operated on, but, it'll be fine. And,
but not using the C word.
Oh, God, no. So that was really difficult because I think after getting the news, I just kind of got on a bit of a, I was just like, right, well, let's get the operation done and I was just trying to break things into pieces and just not get too overwhelmed with getting told I just had this news. And then, but yeah, just having the kids there was really hard. And just, I started thinking about the future then and thinking about worrying about them because we live, I've been separated for 5 years and I'm the primary caregiver and we have like a tight little family unit that...
You're the centre of their universe.
Yeah. And just the idea of not being there for them.
And even acknowledging too that even, however your journey goes, it's a hard journey. Even you having treatment is hard on them, right? It's not just the long-term future and what that might look like. It's the immediate future for them too, the worry about mum and the now. And, mum's having an operation and people seem worried and they're so attuned to those kind of subliminal signals that we all give out.
Yeah, yeah. And I try and keep it as normal as possible. Yeah, and chill and just try and keep the household running as normal, but it's not normal. And, this is skipping forward a bit, but, there's been days, I can't get out of bed or, they have to help me with simple tasks like getting dressed and, the life isn't normal. And I remember thinking it was like when I got told that my brother had died, and from that point on, life is never going to be the same. I'm never going to see my brother again. And the shock of that, it was similar. It was like I've been told this news that I've got cancer and it's in my liver and it's really bad. It's like my life from that point, my life as I know it has changed forever and is, And
as a mum, single parent, your children are on that train with you, really, right?
Yeah. And they're still so young, they're still so young and...
precious. They're precious.
And, and they still rely on me. They're just, I don't want them to grow up without me, I don't want them to have to grow up without a mum. And they're the sort of, things that go through your head at night. And that's what was going through my head in the hospital and... I
remember you a couple of, and this wasn't immediately after your diagnosis, it was maybe a few months later, but, I would get occasional message from you in the night, late in the night, 3 a.m, and you would just be, doing exactly that, lying awake and wondering how, what the future looked like and what the future held for your kids in a world that might not include you.
Yeah.
But, it's, it's not just confronting your own mortality, right? It's the long-lived effects on the most precious people in your life.
Yeah, exactly.
You've been listening to Joe versus Cancer with Joe McKenzie-McLean and me, Colleen O'Hanlon. We know our conversations might be a tough listen, whether you've got cancer or you're caring for somebody who has. There's lots of support available and there's information in the show notes. This is a Stuff podcast produced by Chris Reed. You can listen to the full series at stuff.co.nz or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening. Kia kaha, be strong.